Jill, John, Mark?
I hear you.
Okay, how about Paul? Is Paul on?
I can hear you, Bob.
There you go. Okay, good. Okay, Jill's the party's at your place this weekend?
Yeah, that's right. I'll let you know the
Jill?
time. I'll let you know the time.
Okay. Okay, we'll be waiting.
Okay.
All right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Mr. Johnston?
Okay, we'll just jump right into the agenda that's in front of you or you have on your portal. First, under program presentations, we have Mr. Grimaldi, who will be giving us an update on MTSS. Mr. Grimaldi.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I think we're ready now. Wanted to update you on MTSS, and just a reminder, MTSS is the systems of support here at the Penns Manor School District. That's how we support students through all the tiers. This is our 4th year of implementation for the MTSS program. So we've done a lot of work. We've made a lot of progress, but we've still have a long way to go. David's not changing. This one here. That one. Okay, good. How do I go back? One of the things that we're focusing on this year, along with the MTSS program, is definitely flexibility and creativity. We did some surveys in the beginning of the year before the school year started, just to see what our parents wanted and needed, so we could provide more educational options to them. Mr. Johnston will actually talk about the number of students we have in educational options a little bit later. At times we felt over the summer like we were chasing a moving target, and we were definitely uncertain about things. But we worked through it and we'll continue to maintain the rigor and provide the best education possible. We'll do our best every day. If I could figure this out. One of the hallmarks of MTSS is the pyramid or the triangle. Our goal is always to have 80% of the students down at the bottom of the triangle in the green, and our core curriculum provide success for 80% of our students. 15% of our students is our goal that might need secondary level interventions. And then around 3 to 5% might need tier 3 interventions. But you'll see this triangle throughout the MTSS framework. One of the things that we do at the elementary school that not too many schools do, we do 3 benchmark assessments a year during the school year, at the beginning of the school year, middle of the school year, and end of the school year. And this picture is a little foggy, but it's foggy on purpose because I didn't want you to see the student names. This picture is after our benchmark assessment. We actually break the students down by grade level and by skill and how they did on the assessment. So the red, the students, each student is represented by an index card, and students down in those red pockets down in the bottom are students that are well below the benchmark level. Students in the yellow are below benchmark. Students in the green are at benchmark. And students in the blue pocket charts are above benchmark. So we take a look at every student at every skill they're tested on, and we rank them. And then we actually call the teachers into the conference room and meet with the teachers and make sure that the teachers are seeing the same thing that we're seeing on the assessment. If they're not, we may make some adjustments. We may move kids up, we may move kids down, depending on where they're doing. And then we develop a plan of interventions for those specific skills that those students are needing. So we're giving the students what they need every day. It might be tier 1 is all they need. They might need some tier 2 interventions. They might need some tier 3 interventions. But our meetings, there's a lot of effort and a lot of work put into that. And we're making sure we're giving the students what they need each and every day at the school. This year, we added a little bit more to our MTSS framework. Dr. Fetchkin is on board now. We did some planning over the summer, and she has actually created the next 2 slides that we're using. So these slides, the first one is of the high school. This is our pyramid of interventions that we currently do at the high school. Tier 3 is the top in red, tier 2, targeted intervention, and then tier 1 are universal strategies that we use. I'm not going to go through all those, but she is focusing on the behavioral framework, which is the left column. We already had a lot of the academic framework in place, the middle column, and then we're also looking at the social emotional framework, the third column there. So we've begun to do some work in those areas. This next slide is the same slide basically, but it's for the elementary school. So we've done a lot of work, like I said, in the middle, a column with the academic framework. Those are some of the interventions that we're using. The behavioral framework we're working on, and we're also working on the social emotional framework. These are some of the goals that we have for the MTSS program for year 4. We started Haggerty phonemic awareness in the elementary. We want to get a full year of that under our belt. We have yet to get a full year of instruction in Haggerty under our belt. And also Fundations. Fundations is a phonics program coupled with both spelling and phonemic awareness that our students and teachers in the primary grades K through 3 have been using. Item number 2, we are beginning this year to expand Acadience math assessment to grades 4 and 5. The last year was our first year with Acadience math, and we only did it in grades K through 3. So this year our plan is to expand that to grades 4 and 5. Our math committee is going to begin to look at some possible curriculum changes from the data that we retrieved from the Acadience math assessment. Mrs. Eglin has done a lot of work with wit and wisdom. The teachers actually piloted it last year in grades K through 5. It's authentic and it's rich literature. We felt that was the missing piece that we needed to make our ELA really take off. We built it from the bottom up. We looked at the foundation. Our kids needed phonemic awareness. They needed the phonics instruction. We felt that was solid. So wit and wisdom was the next step that we took to replace an old and aging Storytown with some authentic and rich literature. Mrs. Williams actually had a hand in the next bullet there. Last year, our PBIS core team started planning. We were cut short in March when everything came to an abrupt halt. But one of the things that we want to do this year is to continue planning with our positive behavior intervention and supports team. We had a committee formed, and we'll continue planning, and hopefully maybe in the second half of the year, get into some implementation there. The next bullet is social emotional learning screener. We've looked at some a few social emotional learning screeners for our students over the summer with Dr. Fetchkin. We actually had a webinar with a company that produces the BIMAS 2, which is a screener. And we look to continue to pursue a screener and eventually go that direction and give our students a screener and make some changes from the results from those assessments. We're moving DIBELS. DIBELS, if you remember, is the assessment that is dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. So we've moved that from one platform to the other. The assessment hasn't changed. We just moved it from Amplify to Acadience. So our students are very familiar with that assessment. They'll continue to be familiar with it, but they will have an adjustment in the change of platforms for the assessment. And the last bullet on this slide, the Dyslexia Expansion Grant, this is year 2. We started it last year. We will receive another $10,000. And most of that money is going to be put towards professional development training for the teachers. Some of it may be used towards assessment. This past year, we also used some of that to purchase geodes and some wit and wisdom materials for our students. This is a look at the assessment results for the beginning of the year. DIBELS, that's the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills from the last 2 years. We've done DIBELS the last 2 years at the elementary school. So we see significant improvement. We're focusing on those skills and our students are getting better. Remember, the goal is to get those students, 80% of those students, being successful from tier 1 instruction. We've made a lot of curriculum changes. We'll continue to look at how our students are doing and what we can do to help them. Sure. I forget. So the 18-19 boy DIBELS is the beginning of the year DIBELS for the 18-19 school year. That's where our students were in the beginning of the year for 18-19. The 19-20 is the beginning of the year DIBELS for that school year.
I think it means those are the students that are at or above the benchmark.
Yes. Yes. If you're following a cohort, yes. Yes. If you're following a cohort, you would. But the thing you have to keep in mind too, it's a completely different assessment. So it's, I don't know that it's good to look at a cohort. I mean, it gives you, I guess, a ballpark of that cohort. Yeah. Yeah. So Acadience Math, which remember last year was our first year doing Acadience Math. So we only have a beginning of the year assessment, which is column 1, and then a middle of the year assessment, which is column 2. So this is only a few months of instruction. You'll see a little bit of improvement. We would have liked to have finished out the year last year and get an end of the year assessment, but we couldn't do that with our Acadience. So we didn't have a full year with Acadience Math. Some of the things we learned are down at the bottom of the screen. Kindergarten and first grade students are struggling to know their numbers. Second grade students cannot add and subtract 1 and 2 digit numbers. Third grade students are having trouble adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing 1, 2 digit numbers. Our third grade students are also struggling to solve problems. And back to one of the first slides, I said we're getting creative. Mrs. Zeglin, Mrs. Rizzo, and I actually sat down and came up with a plan for Wednesdays. So Wednesdays, our schedule looks a little different with the early dismissals. We're going to have a lot of teachers, all hands on deck in the morning before the kids leave, and they're really going to hit hard are math facts, okay? One of the issues that we see from the data is that our students are struggling with math fact fluency. So we've come up with a creative plan to help those students on Wednesday. Not that they won't receive interventions the rest of the week, but Wednesdays is going to look a little different this year. And we have a creative plan in place to help our students get where they need to be. And like I said, we only had a little over a half a year last year with Acadience Math. So my hope is that we'll get a full year in this year and get some more data and be able to help our kids. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, and it's actually in another slide here too, that so our Google Classroom students came in on September 1st. We were actually able to screen those kids for the beginning of the year assessment. So when they came in, they spent a lot of time with their teachers, getting to know the Chromebook, making sure they could log in, get into the Google Classroom. And then our specialists, our interventionists for reading and math grabbed them and did an assessment on them so that they could have that beginning of the year score. And we missed a few students on September 1st. So I was calling parents this week. We're going to bring them in next Wednesday when our kids are gone so the specialists can grab them again and assess those kids that did not get assessed on September 1st. Acadience Math, like I said, we did this last year in grades K through 3. The first couple of bullets are some of the areas of focus. Early numeracy, we talked about that. Computation, problem solving. We have a progress monitoring feature on there so that students are struggling. We progress monitor them about every 10 days of instruction to make sure they're making progress. If students aren't making progress, we'll change the intervention. Maybe it's not helping them, it's not working for them. So we'll look at that and change the intervention. Again, it's a lot of work for the teachers, but we're doing what's best for kids and giving them what they need. The benchmarking feature, like I said, we do that 3 times a year. It's all research-based. It's aligned to the Common Core standards. It was recommended to us from Patton. We go to Patton, the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. We get on there in Pittsburgh. We have a consultant that comes here. This is one of the programs recommended to us through some of the grants that we received, and we'll continue to implement it. And like I said, we assess kids on September 1st that were in Google Classroom. Our assessment for our brick and mortar students will start on September 8th. A little bit about math expansion this year in grades 4 and 5. The math, Acadience Math focuses on computation, concepts and applications. We look at all the skills that are assessed. And then, like I said before, Wednesdays is going to be dedicated to math fact fluency. So we're going to keep working on getting students where they need to be. Over the summer, we were actually scheduled to host a Fundations Level 3 training for teachers in this school district, 3rd grade teachers in this school district. We actually had some teachers coming from Peters Township School District. We had some teachers coming from the Meadville area, but that all went awry as soon as March 13th came around. So we didn't give up. It was scheduled to be here, held here at Penns Manor on June 3rd. We didn't give up and eventually got trained online. The two of the teachers, Mrs. Lucas and Mrs. Stair and myself, were trained online July 27th. And then Mrs. Smego could not make that training, so she was trained about 2 weeks later with a school in DC. But like I said, Fundations in 3rd grade focuses on word structure, spelling, and handwriting. And the teachers have been implementing it for about a year now, and now they're trained and have better insight on what they're doing with Fundations. Positive behavior intervention and supports. One of the things that we did this year, and Mrs. Williams was a part of this group, we sat down with Mrs. Williams, the administrative team, Dr. Fetchkin, our school psychologist, and we clearly defined the roles of the people that are in the program. So We, this year we had a new behavior consultant. We're still looking for a behavior interventionist from outside groups. They know specifically what their roles are, and we're continuing to work on that. I talked a little bit about the social emotional learning assessment. We're still looking for that, and we want to make some proactive improvements. It's going to take some time, but the ball is rolling in the right direction now. A little bit about the dyslexia expansion grant that I mentioned. At the tail end of last year, all of our teachers were going to be trained. Some of them were trained. We had a teacher at every grade level go to the IU and train one day. And then we were at Salzburg School District the other day. That was all shut down on March 13th. So our teachers, the rest of the teachers in grades K through 2 completed the training using an online platform called Schoology. It's actually the same platform that our Penn Highland students use. So they were trained in Schoology, finished the training, which was a good thing because we wanted to get that finished last school year. One of our focuses during the training was a 40-minute lesson format. We're continuing to work on that and use that, especially in kindergarten. Our kindergarten teachers did a time study last year of the first part of their day and made some changes in their schedule to better improve what they're doing. We continue to have consults and site visits from Patton. Mrs. Eglin and I met virtually actually over the summer with consultants from Patton. They'll actually be in our school during the school year, looking at what we're doing, helping us improve. One of the focuses this year for the grant will be interventions in kindergarten. I talked already about the $10,000 that we'll receive from the grant this year, and we'll be looking to make improvements with that. Another part of the, well, it not actually part of the grant, but was a training opportunity. And Mrs. Eglin took advantage of this opportunity. She might have to travel to Harrisburg later on in the year, but she is able to be a certified letters trainer. And what that means, the acronym LETTERS stands for literacy, essentials, literacy essentials, teachers of reading and spelling. So she's going to be able to train our teachers. Most of our teachers have already been trained in the modules, but as we get new teachers coming into the district, it will be really nice to have somebody to be able to train those teachers. Right now, the IU hasn't been able to provide us with some of that training, so it'll be really nice to have someone in-house that can do that training. Some of the professional development opportunities that we're offering for our teachers or have offered, and I mentioned most of these, a lot of these have happened already. Acadience Reading Online Assessment, Mrs. Roach and Mrs. Henderson in service the teachers in the first day. Acadience Math, grades 4 and 5, Mrs. Rizzo and Mrs. Antonio in service the teachers on the first day. I had mentioned Fundations. Our teachers were trained in that back in July. Wit and Wisdom, that is ongoing. We're still looking for an online piece to have the teachers trained there. Lots of training with online teaching strategies. Mr. Grambling did some camera training. Some individual teachers stepped up that were more proficient than others and did some training for some teachers on that first week. So we've had a good start to the school year. Lots of training, more than typical with that first week. And I have to say that our students are very well adapted now. That I expected to see kids struggling with the masks and coming into school, but I don't see that. I think the first day at the elementary school, we had one crier, and that's less than typical for a normal first day of school. So the masks and everything, I don't think that they played a big role, and the kids are adapting well and doing well in school, even with mass. So, questions or comments about MTSS?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grimaldi. Any questions for Mr. Grimaldi? Okay, thank you. So we'll move along with our agenda. We have nothing under negotiations this evening. Under curriculum, just wanted to share with you how the first 4 days of the school year has gone. First, I want to call your attention, and it's on your hard copy on the back side of your last page of the agenda. So if you have hard copies in front of you, it goes front and back. So it'd be 4A. And I've also loaded it to the portal if you're online on your agenda portal. First, just want to share with you where we are instruction-wise. So first, our brick and mortar in-person students. We have 315 at the elementary, 341 at the high school, which means we have 656 coming to in-person instruction at this point today. And I would say that at this point today to all of these, because we are seeing some transition right here at the beginning as people are getting settled in. And we've had one or two that has wanted to move to Google Classroom, but I would say a majority of the moves have been to come back into the brick and mortar. So next row that I have there is our second option that we've had for students to be in, and that's our Google Classroom while they're at home. We have 42 students at the elementary school, 65 at the high school. So we have a total of 107 students in our second option. In our Penns Manor Cyber School, we have 1 at the elementary school, 9 at the high school, so a total of 10 in our cyber, our Penns Manor Cyber. And then our outside cyber, we have 11 students, elementary students, 24 high school students, a total of 35. And so you may want to know, well, what's the comparison from the prior year? Last year, we had 32 students in our outside cyber. So we've really only increased by 3 for our outside cyber school students. So just wanted to give you a snapshot of what it looks like today of the students and where they are in our different options. Is there any questions on that particular sheet?
Mr. Johnston?
Anyone?
John Hardesty
Yes.
here, Mr. Johnston.
Yes.
The outside cyber for the elementary school, is that up tremendously or has it always been in that range?
That is up by 1. The additional ones are in the high school.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions on that particular table?
I said not a question, but last year we incurred about $500,000
That's correct.
cost for 32. I guess we don't know the mix yet between special education and regular, or we do?
And I'm projecting that the cost for cyber tuition will probably be north of 600,000.
600,000.
Yes.
Pick up, gents, please.
Sorry about that, Mr. Hardesty. The question was, what are we expecting for the cost for cyber tuition for 2020-21? And I responded by saying we're probably looking at north of 600,000. There's 2 factors that play into cyber tuition. The first is obviously the number of kids and whether they're regular education or special education. This is sort of fun with the steaming glasses. And the second part is every year our cost to educate kids internally or the cost to operate this district goes up, the tuition itself goes up. So even if we were to say have no increase in the number of kids enrolling in outside cyber, the cost for outside cyber would continue to rise because our costs to operate the school district rise. So the only true way to see a decrease in the cost for cyber tuition would be one of 2 ways. One, our cost to operate go down, which we know is virtually impossible to do. Or 2, the number of kids truly goes down by a significant sum to offset the increase in the cost to operate. So it's definitely a significant
Is it
sum
safe
of
to
money.
say
It's
when,
definitely. Go ahead, Mr. Hardesty.
I'm sorry, is it safe to say generally that outside cyber costs us 21 to 46,000. Is that where that range is, depending upon regular ed and special ed?
So are you talking about the per student cost for a regular child and a special education child?
Outside cyber. Outside cyber, is it 21 to 46? Is that basic range? That's the one I've been telling some folks when we talk about it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the easiest way for the 2020-21 school year, the cost to pay for one regular education child in outside cyber is $15,000 for Penns Manor. And if that child is a special education child, whether they were classified as special education when they left us, or they were classified as special education after they left us, that will be $35,000 for that student.
And we're saying we're in the $14,000 range? Is that our internal cost for?
So our actual tuition costs, and it's actually, the tuition is actually published by by PDE. It's approximately $9,000 for an elementary school student, and about $11,000 or $12,000, maybe a little higher, might be $13,000 now for a high school student. And it's important to note that the two tuition numbers are different. Here's why they're different. First, the charter school law established a regular ed and a special ed tuition rate based off of the cost to operate the brick and mortar school. However, those two rates, those two tuition rates, are different than how the school tuition rate is set. Say if we were to accept a child from Purchase Line, and I'll give you an example. So if we were to take, say, a special education child from Purchase Line or another school district, for example, we could not charge them the cyber tuition special education rate of $35,000. We would only be able to charge them whether they were an elementary school student or a high school student, and we would charge them that corresponding tuition rate. So even the tuition rates that are charged between school districts is different than the tuition that is charged between a school district and a cyber school.
One last question, I think. Do we see, you had mentioned that if someone starts outside cyber and they're not considered a special ed, do we see a trend of them being declared special ed once they're in?
To answer that, I would say that we've probably had 3 of our students, once they went out to cyber school, that they became special ed. They weren't special ed when they left us, but were then determined to be special education students once they were in the outside cyber. Also, just a point note, since through the summer and into beginning of the school year, 7 students in our school district have joined into the outside cyber. So we've had, you can see the total there is 35. We had 32 before. 2 out of the whole group graduated last year, but we have 7 new ones that have been added to outside cyber, giving us the
Thank you.
35. Yep. Any other questions on that one? Okay. And then if you look at the other sheet that I've provided, what I do each day is I just take a look, and again, it's a handout or it's on the portal. I just try to take a look at what does the cases look like in our school district. So I just keep a sheet running all the time, and I check it each day to see where our cases are. So I've listed at the top of that page the zip codes in our school district. I've listed the confirmed cases in our school district since March. I've also listed the negative results of tests. And again, all this information comes from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. So then I also look at the other zip codes that sort of touch us in our school district. Now, mind you, we probably do have a handful of families that have an Indiana address that's out towards Airport Road. We also have a handful of individuals who have a Northern Cambria zip code, but a majority of ours is Howard, Alberta, Strongstown, Penn Run, and Clymer. So you can see as of today, that we have 25 positive cases. And again, don't know the ages of those individuals, but then you can see the negative results. So then again, look at the surrounding zip codes that border us. And I just helps me gauge and looking as we move forward. And again, it's just for me to have knowledge as we determine how things are going. So I just wanted to share that with you, that sort of keep track of that to see what the surrounding confirmed cases are. Any questions on that one?
Tomorrow, Mr. Johnson, is that when the official determinations made for low, moderate, or high? Is that every Friday?
Yes, that usually comes out every Friday afternoon. That determination, yes.
So if it moved us greatly, the school will have to switch, worst case scenario, over the weekend?
Well, here's usually how it happens. Even though that will change, that low, moderate, and substantial would change, it also goes based on the cases that we have actually in our district. So now, and I will certainly get this tomorrow and I'll share it with you. There is an actual guidance chart for me to follow. So in that guidance chart, depending on where our county is identified, low, moderate, or substantial, it also depends then, do you have, so up across the top of the chart, it gives, well, do you have 1 or 2 cases? If you have 1 or 2 cases, you're to move forward, just quarantining those particular groups, but keep the building open. If we would move into the range of having 2 to 4, it tells us that we should close the particular school building for a certain period of time. If it goes even higher than that, then it tells us what to do, and which is closing the school for a longer period of time. So I can't say that I would make the decision to close school just because that county status changes. It'll go based on county status plus how many cases we have within our school district.
Thank you.
Yep. So there's 2 pieces to that data table.
Mr. Johnson, as far as the data that you're getting from the Department of Health on this, was that guidance that was given through PDE to go to this as a resource? Because I know a lot of times confirmed cases, reported negative cases, it's a lagging indicator.
True.
And that's why they were always, as different counties went through the Commonwealth, you would have a spike.
Right.
And it talked about the reporting units, and then there was the back and forth. Is this the recommendation from PDE to use this data?
Yeah. Well, so the recommendation to use the data from PDE is actually the chart that Mr. Hardesty talked about. I keep this particular information just for myself in the background because here's why. We get media. Our media is from the Pittsburgh area and everywhere else. So when they are talking about situations, I then have to go back and say, okay, well, what's happening in our district? So even though I know media may be saying this is taking place, this is getting worse, or that particular is happening, I feel I need to take time to sit down in a quiet spot, go through all that data, look at our zip codes and say, well, what's truly happening in our district? So that's why I keep that one. The other one, the one that Mr. Hardesty asked about, is the guidance that we're to follow as a district, which means that PD has provided us with a data chart. Again, it's low, moderate, and substantial, depending on what the county's labeled on that Friday. And then out across the top, it's if you have 1 or 2 positive cases within your school district. If you have 2 to 4, you do this. And if you have 5 or more, this is what you do. So again, the chart that I'm just sharing with you is just for me to keep me grounded and thinking as to what's happening within the district.
Okay, because just to sort of lead upon what John was talking about there in the substantial and moderate and low, I think that you would probably have to look at maybe this data and pull some other items before a reaction would take place. Because say, for instance, all of a sudden this is reviewed and the spike goes up that puts us in a high level.
Sure.
and, you know, sound the alarms, alerts and all.
Sure.
I think we just need to sort of look at the data
Correct.
reasonably. And it seems like that's sort of the approach.
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
What we would particularly look at is across the top of the chart, and I'll send this to you all tomorrow, or I'll send you the link so you can see the particular data that I'll have to watch is the cases that's positive within our school district. So, I mean, that will be the driving force of any decision that we make. So I will just, again, communicate to anybody that watches our board meeting. Clearly, it tells me if we have 1 or 2 cases, we would not close our buildings. We would quarantine and follow the Department of Health's guidance, and we would quarantine those particular people that need to be quarantined. It's really not giving guidance to close any building until you get above the 2 positive cases within your own school district that affects us. So that particular data would drive us, me being told by the Department of Health, positive cases that we have, that would drive it more than probably any of the other data.
So I guess probably it would be safe to say too, is in a comparison to other neighboring school districts, we're looking specifically at our own
Yes.
zip code areas that comprise our school district.
Yes.
So whenever we have conversations with neighboring school districts, whether it be outside family members and all that,
Mhm.
if, say, for instance, a United or Marion Center or Purchase Line goes into a different category, yet within the same county,
Yes.
we may react differently than they would.
Absolutely, we will.
Okay, so that-
Absolutely.
That's
W-
probably a good important point to make sure
Yes.
that everybody understands, rather than holistically looking at a county, it may be affected differently in one district compared to another.
Sure, sure. And absolutely. We will look specifically at us. So if anyone hears in the media of a school district doing something or closing, it will be honestly the determination that that superintendent or board is making based off of the positive cases that they have within their school district. So we could be going along. We have absolutely no positive cases. A neighboring school district may end up with 4 or 5, and they may totally close. So absolutely. Glad you pointed that out. It will not be a county-wide decision. I mean, that would take a governor's order. Right now, we have decided as a board, I will continue to look at the data. We will look at the positive cases in our district, and my reaction of what we will do within the district is based on positive cases in our district.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point to make to any community members too, whether it be a statement on a website or anything like that, because everybody's sort of, proceeding with caution.
Correct.
Because, the opening was sort of a first step.
Right.
And everybody's sort of, wondering what's going to occur.
Sure.
And I think if we can just make it known that it's a district look at
Absolutely.
what our conditions are is what drives moving forward.
For sure. And then before I leave that information, I just have to say and tell all of you as board members is that, and parents and students that are watching, I mean, last month I asked for everyone to make sure that they come to the plate, that they support and do things that we've asked them to do to try to mitigate anything that could happen with COVID. And I will tell you, I probably couldn't ask anybody to do a better job. Everywhere from the beginning of the day to we have now more people driving to school to alleviate the number of people we have on buses. I mean, we have more student drivers. We have more parents delivering students. Next step, students coming into the building. There is no question in mind. They expect their temperature to be taken. Every single student has a face covering on. I'm looking back at the administrators, and I don't think there's been a situation at all once schools got started with any particular situation or where no one's wearing a face mask. So I have to say, again, when I asked parents and students last month, please help because it's really in our control now. We're in school and we're trying to move forward. When we ask for help, you delivered. So I honestly believe that's why we're here. I believe that's why we're moving along with no positive cases, knock on wood, because everybody come forward knowing what we needed to do, and it's been done. So hats off everywhere from parents to students to employees. Couldn't have asked for a better result, honestly, and everyone cooperating. So just wanted to say that so that you know as board members that for everything that's gone on in the past 5 months, we had a very good, smooth start for the school year. I don't know if any administrator wants to rebel against that, but my observation is that every student that's come through the door, every employee has adjusted, and I couldn't have asked them to do a better job. One other thing I want to point out, and I'll ask Mr. Muscatello if he wants to share anything with this, just to help get the word out, and that is that we are providing free meals. So that has just begun. So I don't know if you want to share anything additional to that.
Yeah, actually, before I move on to that part, Mr. Johnson spends a lot of time thanking his faculty, his staff, and his community. But one thing that we don't do often enough is thank Mr. Johnston. And one thing that we know through this entire process is Mr. Johnston is great at keeping a level head. And it's actually quite impressive to sit in a room with him, because we can all get really worked up, but Mr. Johnston never does. And that's really quite a pleasure to work with. And I specifically think about the administrative team meeting that we even had today, where some of us got worked up, and I looked over, Mr. Johnston was not worked up. So he does a really great job of bringing us back in and reeling us back in. But one thing's for sure, that the start of the school year being so smooth is a testament to his leadership. And even more importantly, the leadership that we receive from this board. And so I just want to thank Mr. Johnson. I'm sure the other administrators would say the same. And also want to thank this board for keeping a level head while we make some really difficult decisions to bring our kids back to school. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Speaking about the food, the Department of Agriculture did decide to extend what I would consider to be the most important waiver to be able to feed kids. It was the waiver that allowed us to feed our community over the summer. And I had brought this to the board early on in the process, and I said, we need to try to make this work. And two things happened. One, it slowly ramped up and got very popular. And we found out that this whole entire multi-purpose room that we're sitting in today became a sort of a large assembly machine of making bagged lunches. And so we gave away thousands of lunches this summer, and it was a very successful program, and we fed the community, the students in this community. And so they came out and did that. And while it wasn't necessarily a break-even program for us, it was the most successful seamless summer feeding program that this district has ever seen, because of the waivers that the U.S. Department of Agriculture put in place and allowed us to feed in this very unusual, atypical time. That same waiver that we had over the summer was extended literally on the first day of school. Was extended, and so the first day of school was a normal everyday you have to pay for your lunch sort of day. By the next day, we had received word that the waiver had been extended, and the waiver had been extended in the same fashion it was in the summer. So free breakfast and free lunches will be provided to all students in our district. It even went on to say that the waiver also applies to really any kid 18 and under that would like to get a meal. So it applies to all school districts. We announced it on Facebook yesterday, and it's extremely popular. I actually spent some time in the high school lobby today, not necessarily forcing breakfasts upon people, but giving them away to anybody who wanted one. And our breakfast participation here is very low. We we actually sold 3 breakfasts on Monday, and today we did 150, right? Something like that. So fairly successful. And I expect the program to ramp up as kids who are eating breakfast in the morning see that, the kids sitting next to them isn't eating a breakfast. Eventually, they're all going to be eating breakfast. And so the high school teachers were very accommodating. They're eating breakfast in the first period. Elementary school, we're making progress in having K through 2 come into the cafeteria to eat, and then 3, 4, and 5 we're actually delivering the breakfast to the rooms. So we know there's some studies out there that show that if you get a good night's sleep and you eat a breakfast, learning maybe ends up being a little bit easier for you, or you're at least a little bit more alert in the classroom. So that's the goal here, is to get breakfast out as much as possible. And then lunch, of course, is also 100% free, and kids will still have an option. Unlike over the summer where they had a bagged lunch, kids will actually still have an option, but it will be free. So very successful program. We're hoping it's going to be very successful. That waiver expires at the end of December 2020, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture has mentioned or has claimed that if they receive funding, they will extend the program through the entire school year.
Okay. Any questions you have for us for the first 4 days of things that's taken place? Any questions from anyone? Okay.
Just
go ahead.
one question, as far as a Chromebook distribution and everything like that, how, I guess, we didn't have any issue about not having that available device to give out. Every student that we intended to have one got one.
Well, actually, our intention was for every single student to have one, and yes, we have one for every single student. Yep.
Because I know I've seen in surrounding areas, they struggle with
Yes.
that. And I think at our last meeting, it was noted that we made that initial attempt to gather up all the devices we need. So we're okay when it comes to that side of it.
We are in good shape. Absolutely. Yep. And again, hats off to Mr. Gramling and Mr. Muscatello and everyone for back. We had the drive and the forethought to hurry up and get them ordered. And I think we were the first in. So we have them. So it was a good thing. Yes. Other questions about the beginning of the year? Okay. Moving to budget and finance, we'll have a motion for you to give Mr. Muscatello the authority to vote for PSBA slate of candidates. He's provided the handout that is in front of you. There's no one competing in any of the areas, and there's also write-ups there listed. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to the PSBA.
No, except that the closest candidate on the list is in Allegheny County. Everybody else is extended. So what I'll do is, I think we've typically taken the approach here that if there's somebody in Indiana County, we'll vote for them, or the surrounding counties will vote for them. I'll take a look at the ones that are the closest to us. And if you don't have any objections to those on the list, I'll just follow our tradition and vote for those who are the closest to us.
Anybody west of the Susquehanna is my suggestion.
You got it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on PSBA slate of candidates? Okay. Next, Mr. Muscatello will talk about that one too, and that's liability insurance proposal. That's 5B as your handout.
Yes, and before I jump into that, I know that while we're handing out thank yous for the night, it probably goes without saying at this point, because these meetings run so smoothly and technology did get handed out so well, and we actually had the technology. But our technology staff here has done a phenomenal job in ensuring a smooth start to the school year. I think it goes without saying, if you notice the seamless transition between those here in the room and those virtual, I think we have a good recipe for conducting these meetings. And furthermore, if there's anybody that keeps an even cooler or calmer head than Mr. Johnson, it is definitely Dave Gramling. I've never actually seen Dave Gramling stressed out about anything. However, he was almost at his breaking point when the school year started and he had to manage over 800 Chromebooks. But hats off to him for pulling that off, because I'm not sure, as a former director of technology, I would have been able to keep a cool head just like Dave. So hats off, Dave. Liability, I think I'm done with the thank yous for tonight. The liability policy, I do have some decent news. The liability policy for this year, the current year that we're in, expires at the end of this month, and it's currently with Liberty Mutual. And we've been with Liberty Mutual, I believe, for a couple of years now, and we sort of switch back and forth depending on who has the best rate, the best coverage, so on and so forth. This year, we did get a quote from Liberty Mutual as well as CM Regent, and CM Regent has been our carrier in the past. And it is actually my official recommendation that we go with CM Regent, and I'll tell you why. So CM Regent actually was more expensive on the property and liability side than Liberty Mutual. However, significantly cheaper auto and umbrella rates. So we're currently paying, this year's premium was almost $51,000. And the CM Regent rate is, what do I have there? $47,638 without acts of terrorism. So I just want to tell you that the largest difference between the two proposals that you see there, and you don't see all of the back data, but the largest difference between CM Regent and the Liberty Mutual proposal is two things. The first is, instead of $5 million in earth movement coverage, which is what Liberty Mutual is proposing, CM Regent's only proposing $1 million in earth movement coverage. And I just clarified that that is actually an earthquake. And so before fracking, the last earthquake I understand in this area was in like 1940. So much like the odd thing that we do, a fire drill every month, and there hasn't been a fire in a school district since before 1955, our insurance carrier was okay with lowering our limits on our earth movement or earthquake coverage from 5 million to 1 million, and he didn't really seem to have too much of a problem with that. The other thing to keep in mind too, and I can send you the details if you'd like, but actually the coverage with CM Regent is more comprehensive, and some of the limits are actually higher than Liberty Mutual is proposing, which is why the property and liability costs are a little bit higher. But in all regards, with the exception of the earth movement or earthquake coverage, the liability coverages for property and liability and auto and umbrella are all at least the same, if not higher, than what Liberty Mutual is proposing, and it is cheaper. So, and just a quick note that Walbeck Insurance Agency has been serving this district for more than 3 decades. And when I first got here, of several things that I did, I wanted to make sure that that we were being treated properly, that they were working on our behalf, that they were a broker that was shopping our policies, that was asking the right questions and things like that. And I'm confident and comfortable in saying that the Walbeck Insurance Agency, specifically Rob Walbeck himself, is doing that. I feel very comfortable with the rates that we're getting, and I know they're being shopped. So, and he's fought with us with the underwriters, worked with us last year with Liberty Mutual when we had a legal claim. You may remember we had a case that went to federal court. Worked with our Liberty Mutual claims adjuster, worked with Liberty Mutual in processing the claim, and it was phenomenal on that piece for us. So in addition to shopping our policies, he's also great to work with. His whole team is great to work with in getting claims processed. So I strongly recommend that we go with CM Regent this year. You do have an option to select certified acts of terrorism. We didn't select it this year, and we haven't selected it in the past, but he does always recommend it with the caveat that a certified act of terrorism at Penns Manor School District is highly unlikely. So, any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Just one on inland marine up on top. CM Regent doesn't have a price.
I'm sorry. I couldn't.
Inland marine, CM Regent doesn't have a price built in there. Are we covered with inland marine? I'm going by up on top where the coverage is, not below certified acts.
I see what you're saying, and I'm going to have to check on that. I'm going to have to check and see even what type of coverage that might be. Inland marine coverage. Let me check on that. I want to make sure that he didn't forget to put included in there, as if it was included in the upper liability limits, and also to make sure that that's even something that we need.
Okay, I'm thinking that inland marine covered if you were hauling something, it covered your product, but I'm not positive on that.
Doesn't inland marine cover like equipment? I think I had a policy one time on a backhoe. It was inland marine.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me check and see what that is.
To see why there's not a number in there.
Sure.
Because if it's something that we need to have, we should get a quote put in there.
Sure.
Now, maybe it's included with everything else. I
Yeah,
don't
and that's
know.
what I'm wondering if the word included just got missed.
Okay, okay.
So I guess one question I do have is, do you want to go with the certified acts of terrorism? We didn't go with it last year. We've never gone with it. He makes the recommendation with the caveat that obviously certified acts of terrorism are,
How much is it, Josh?
for CM Regents, $839.
Oh, okay, that whole
Yeah.
group there, I see. Okay.
And that would just be for CM Regent, that would just be $839 certified acts of terrorism on property. And I would check to see if general liability, inland marine, and umbrella, it would be covered under those things, but I'm guessing probably not.
I would say leave it off.
I have to agree. I would leave it off.
Just looking at inland marine with a quick Google, I think Mr. Belchick was correct. It's covering products, materials, and equipment while being transported on land, such as truck or by train.
Okay.
So
So
I'm not sure what we have in that category.
Sure, I'll ask Mr. Walbeck if that type of claim for that specific thing would be covered under our general liability, and if not, does he recommend coverage in that
I
area?
was right too, my backhoe.
Is that right? Well, Ron beat you to the punch.
Yeah, yeah, I had to have it on the coal that I hauled, so, yeah.
So general consensus on CM Regent then, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you very much.
Any other questions under budget and finance for this evening? Okay, buildings and grounds. We've still listed the antenna update. Mr. Wagner had at the IU had headed us in the direction of having the county commissioners contact us. I'm sure you've also read in the paper about fiber coming our direction. I'm even going to let Josh give you more details because he's kept up honestly with this one better than me. So antenna, we're going to leave on the building at this point because there could be some use for it. So any other things you want to add?
Yeah, so you probably did read in the paper that the county's telecommunications provider that operates or has built out their public safety network, Solsgiver, who has been a participant in at least the last 2 or 3 RFPs for the school district-wide internet that connects all the schools together, not successful, but they are working with the county now. I believe that there's a good deal of money available for them to continue to build out this public safety network, which, by the way, has some commercial and residential applications built into it. And one of the things that's happening in phase 1 of the most recent part of this project is that they will be bringing fiber up 553 and up 403 and will be meeting at the corner of our district here. I don't know where it's going to go from there. My guess is it will continue out 553 to Howard and Alberta, which is another area of concern when it comes to the internet and in terms of reliability of high-speed broadband. But there's really 2 things that's happening here. The first is that as part of this grant, we're hoping that Solsgiver will be able to bring a fiber line into our building and feed wireless to homes off of the tower on top of our elementary school. They have not come out to survey the site yet. There's a couple things they need to do. Is it high enough to feed enough people and make it worth it? And 2, which is my particular concern, and Mr. Dalton, if he's still listening, his concern as well, I don't want them putting hundreds of pounds of equipment on top of that thing, it falling over and it being our responsibility to take the damage to the building and repair it. So we still have yet to work out those finer details. But if the tower can serve as a central point of distribution for wireless internet, let's say in the immediate 20-mile radius of our building, that's excellent for us because we know that at least in the 20-mile radius, there's probably hundreds of people without internet. In addition, the solution that Solsgiver is suggesting can help serve our rural communities can actually go up on telephone poles. It's more of a cell phone connection, so it's a cell phone type signal that goes out and is received wirelessly by the homes and brought in by a wire and it, according to them, is rather affordable compared to some of the lower end, more expensive solutions that are out there. I'm optimistic at this point, but my guess is we won't see a lot of movement of internet being actually received into the homes probably until year's end, if not early next year.
One question I have with the use of the tower, and I guess, you know, that's ownership of the district that has that tower or available tower. Would this be some sort of agreement that we would have, like a lease agreement or some sort with Saltzgiver, that we could have, you know, any kind of maintenance responsibilities and things like that fall back on those? Plus, is there some return on having that facility available?
Well, first of all, just to clarify who owns the tower. So at the moment, that tower was probably put in 2006 by a company at the time called Sting Communications. And Sting Communications was the provider of the internet for the districts in Armstrong and Indiana County. And so that tower is pretty old. And so Sting filed bankruptcy and was bought out by a company named Affinity. And Affinity still exists, but their Affinity PA operations were dissolved. And at the moment, it's been indicated to us that Affinity is willing to have a quick claim on that tower, and we potentially could assume ownership of that tower. The question remains at this point. The details are, we're not sure that the tower is useful. That's number one. Number two, if it is useful, and the equipment they need to put on the tower can be supported by the tower, it would be my recommendation. Obviously, we'd want to consult with council that the district assume ownership of the tower and lease it in a way that puts all of the liability of the tower onto the provider, even if it is just for a nominal fee. Because we don't want to be the barriers to providing internet to our rural areas. However, we do want to transfer the liability and make sure we indemnify ourselves from any sort of cost that it might arise from that. Sure.
Any other questions or any other item under buildings and grounds that need to be brought up? Okay, moving on to athletics. We do have one request to approve a volunteer. That's one volunteer for cheerleading. Faith Johns would be on the agenda for next week. Also, before we leave athletics, I do want to just make a comment to all of you, and that is this. As we approach athletics, and anyone that's listening to our board meeting, please give us time. We're quite aware of everything that has been going on. Let's face it, we have taken one step to, let's go backwards. We were in question at one point, would we even have athletics? We've arrived to the point that we're moving forward with athletics. Then we arrived to the point that there would be no spectators. Now we have arrived yesterday to the governor saying that spectators can be included. And I know media has put out that the big titles of spectators are now allowed in sports, but there's other criteria there that we must meet as a district, which the criteria, if you take a look at it, holds us to 25 indoors, 250 out. So that's just the surface. Beyond the surface, there's many gears that works when it comes to athletics. And what I mean by that is that we have to have discussion, and we will do that this evening in executive session with our board, that we need to take a look at ourselves and what we feel confident that we can do. We have to look at those numbers. We have to look at how many individuals can actually go in and still meet the criteria of 25 indoor, 250 outdoor. The other gear to this is not only do we have to look at ourselves as a district, we have to look at ourselves as a part of a conference, because we have to make sure of what other schools are doing. When we take a look at, an outdoor situation with a football game, band, cheerleaders, etc., spectators. So please, if you're listening to this board meeting, by this time next week, I would hope that we can sit here as an administration board and say the things that we will do. But just as anything else that we've gone through since March, it takes a little bit of time. to step back, listen to what media is telling you, breathe, and then make a good, honest effort to move forward in collaboration with everybody in the conference. And what I mean by that is, we have to make decisions as a conference. We certainly can't have a band be transported to a school and someone is not letting a group of individuals in, that type of thing. So if you're a student or a parent, please bear with us as we move through this week or so. We've heard many things. We know spectators wants to be part of it. We know band wants to be part of an outdoor. We know cheerleaders want to be, and of course, at a football game, football teams. So we know all that. We also know that we have the criteria of 250 people. So there's a lot of things in place. We just want to make sure that we've had discussion and come up with a good plan before we deliver that out, because it takes not only us as a district, but again, it takes us as a heritage conference to meet and come together to see what that looks like when we go into competition. So please bear with us. And we will do our best effort for next week to tell you how we're moving forward with individuals that will be part of those events. And again, absolutely not wanting to leave anyone out. We're not trying to upset anyone, but just as anything else that we've done since March, we have to make sure that we're following expectations and guidelines that's been given to us. There's things such as guidelines, there's such things as requirements. So as we root through both of the levels of requirements and guidelines, give us that amount of time, and then we will certainly let folks know how we will operate in collaboration with the conference. Any other questions under athletics? Okay, next, transportation. Approved drivers, additional drivers that has been added for this coming school year. You can see those listed on the agenda. Nothing under public relations. The only thing I would like to again say in public relations is that honestly, I have to say, and I know Josh does always thank employees, but I will tell you folks, if it wasn't for the employees and coming up with what we're doing, it would not be going as smooth as it is. So everywhere from administration, our teachers, complete adjustment to our support staff. Hats off to all of them for making this school year begin smoothly. Next, under policies, asking for you to take a look at this policy, and let's just spend a few moments with it. Because what I'm putting in front of you is a policy that is not coming from PSBA, but because of an MOU that we're going to be discussing in executive session tonight about live streaming video. I had spoken with Carl Beard, and he had recommended that the district take a look at use of live stream video on school district property. So I would ask that you would take time to read through that. This particular policy outlines student-initiated use of live stream video, employee-initiated use of live stream video of classroom instruction and distance learning. So all of those types of things are laid out so that we can uphold those as we move forward. And again, this policy is related to everything that we've shifted to. And we want to make sure that we outline the expectations, that we hold people accountable when something may be done incorrectly. So that is why it's been recommended by Mr. Beard, and also now making the recommendation to you that we add this as a policy. And if you have questions throughout the week, when you take a look at that, please ask me. We'll get the information for you. But that is a brand new policy that actually background information and checked over by Mr. Beard so that we have that in place. And just point out again, that's not a PSBA one, but since it's so new, Mr. Beard said he would recommend that we pass this particular policy. Any questions on that one? Okay. Next, under new business, you can see we have a list of folks to approve on the sub list. We also have a motion to approve Mrs. Donatelli She had added on from the list that we did the previous month. Also, in executive session this evening, I'll communicate to you 3 employees requesting FMLA. Also, just as I indicated before, we have a MOA with PMEA for this particular school year that we'll talk about in executive session. Next, going to new business letter G. Also, Mr. Muscatello, we have him assigned to cafeteria. So he has also drafted up a cafeteria worker job description. So do you want to go over that?
Sure. I'm going to wear out this microphone today. Yeah. So the cafeteria at the moment does not have an official board approved job description that I could find. And one of the charges that this district has had for a couple of years now is to make sure that everybody has a job description that's board approved. I think the cafeteria is the last position in the support staff that needs a
Yes.
job description.
Yep.
So I'm not going to go through it line by line, but what we've gone through many revisions of this. And so what we tried to capture in this is everything that they're currently doing, as well as a couple of things that we thought that they should be doing. So do you have any specific questions on the job description or anything jump out at you or comments or? Okay. Well, great. Thank you.
And just the same with that particular one, if throughout the week you review that and see any item on there that you have a question about or want more definition to, please contact Josh or I.
Just to clarify, when it's under the organization reports to food service manager, that is our outside
Correct.
food service manager. We do not have a food service manager employed by Penns Manor School District, correct?
Correct. And just to understand the hierarchy of this. So there's the cafeteria worker, there's the food service manager, which in our case is outsourced. And there's a required position called food service director, which I hold the title of that. So the food service manager reports to me, and the cafeteria workers report to the food service manager.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there wasn't any break in continuity when you have a description outlined and an issue or an issue arises between one position and somebody didn't get it and it's based on
Sure.
a personality thing.
Sure.
I didn't know how that comes into play. But I think that structure, it's been in place for a while. I just didn't know if it was ever.
Yeah, and that's
thought of
actually,
as-
that's the state prescribed structure. So if we didn't have that position outsourced, that would be the title for the position internally as well, food service manager. So the job description allows us to go outsource it as well as be internal. So without changing the job description.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay. Moving on, new business, letter H. The senior class has asked for a trip to be approved to King's Dominion, Washington, D.C., Baltimore. That would take place in May. So just want your opinion. So again, I mean, I know the situation we're in. And so you may be saying, well, Mr. Johnson, why in the world are you even putting this on here? So there's a reason, because planning has to take place, meaning that we get it. And I will recommend to them to make sure, just so that you know, last year's didn't take place, money all come back. And so the request is in so that they can plan and they can drive money towards that trip. So it would be with the stipulation to know that we don't know what the future brings, but you'd be approving it to let them know to go ahead and plan. But by all means, if you don't even feel comfortable with that, I would like to let them know that. My recommendation is that this would be passed with the stipulation to know that it may not get to take place. No one, I don't even know where we'll be in December, let alone in May. But I don't want to hold back anyone that needs to plan, get things in place. But if your question is, well, what happened last year when they didn't get to go? All that money was returned. Is that correct, Mrs. Dolges? I think even the checks were returned. Once it was returned from the companies, it come back, actually even went back to the student.
The only trouble is this year might be a little bit different because we're already aware of what's going on. Last year with the band, it was sprung on us like snapping your finger. This year, to get all your money back, everybody's going into it with open eyes. So you have to be aware that could be a problem. You might not get all the money back this year.
Is it a situation that you want us to make sure that is guaranteed? I'm just asking. And honestly, if you don't feel comfortable, the answer will just be that no, we're not approving it. Or I can make sure that they've contacted the agency that they've worked with in the past and say, we know what happened last year. We know we're in a situation. We know that we're in a difficult situation. Are we going to be guaranteed that that's going to happen again? Or we can just not feel comfortable and say, no, not going. Advice from all of you.
I have one comment probably on that is, and I know the lead time that's required and needed and all of that. I mean, if you do have a motion crafted that would outline, yes, knowing today that potential is going to be there potentially in the future, but with that exemption of not knowing that, I think that would, I mean, it's like almost like a buyer beware, let's call it, that knowing that if you're going to participate in that as a senior and you start to raise money and you have full intentions to go, that you understand that you may not get all of your money back. Yeah, I don't know how that can be crafted in a way that,
Well, and
that you can initiate it, but not really fully approve it until that point in time comes, I suppose.
Sure. And I would almost then let's see if we can get that answer by next week as to how the company will handle the situation. And I will make sure that it's crafted. So here's the only way it'll appear on the agenda is if we can find out from the company that the money would come back and that still the stipulation that it will be determined to go based on what could happen in May. So if all those things fall in place, we'll have the motion on the agenda. If any of that doesn't fall in place, well, it won't be on. And if I can't get the answer by next week, it'll be on next month. Yes, go ahead.
Darren, it's Jill. Would you be able to request that the company that they're dealing with give us something in writing as to what their protocol would be if the trip was to be canceled?
Yes, absolutely. And probably even before I put it on this agenda, I should have made sure that the advisors already got that. And maybe they have. I have not talked to them directly. So let me make sure that that's in place, and we will ask for it in writing.
All right. Thank you, Darren.
Yep. Okay. And is there anything else for the good of the order? We do have some items in executive session that we need to talk about, but is there anything that we need to discuss in the rest of the open meeting this evening? Okay, if not, we will be back next Thursday for the business meeting. And again, thank you for everyone and your cooperation to making sure that the first 4 days of school has operated smoothly for us. Thank you.